So let's talk about how to stop doing it all yourself. The truth is that at every new level, there's a new devil. And what got you here won't get you there. Do you feel like if you don't do it, then it's not going to get done? I remember the times that I felt this way, burning out, scorching the earth around me, building systems around me, only to find myself on the hamster wheel, more burnt out, with more to do, doing more, putting more on my plate, building more systems around me to continue in the loop. Inevitably, the more weight that we put on our shoulders, the more we end up carrying, and from my experience, that quickly snowballs out of control and really makes us the keystone in everything. If you feel like you're constantly on the wheel, feeling like you need to be doing everything yourself, stretched thin, constantly putting out fires, and you want to be the confident leader that's running your operation so it can't run you, then I can help. Click the link in the description below the video to find out how. And when you do join us in the program, you'll be around chefs like Brandon Gross, who used to look at all the things in his operation that he wanted to change, but then through the program itself, learned to focus and take it task by task in order to complete the implementation of the systems that his program needed, and the systems that didn't exist up until that point, so the development and the implementation. So stick around for 3 keys that I've come across in my decades in the industry, which have allowed me to lighten the load of carrying or feeling like I'm carrying the operation on my shoulders, and stop me from being spread thin, from constantly being pulled in different directions, desperate for progress, and put me in a place where I was organized, leading a team that embraced my vision, and confident that my operation was structured to run the way it was supposed to without me always being the keystone holding it all together. Do you ever think back and have moments in your career that stick out more than others? For me, I have definite periods of life that stick out quite more vibrantly than others. And one of my clearest that comes to mind was from the opening of the Beach Club at Westchester Country Club. It was May 2010, and I was hired about 30 days before the beach opening. Now, I really wanted to be a part of this leadership team, and it was the only way that I was going to be able to find my way in was to take this beach chef job. Now, when I got in, there were no notes, no staff lined up, nothing on the schedule, no startup of the Coke machine or the fountains for Pepsi, the icy machines, nothing was scheduled. What's even more important to note is that when I started in this role, I'd never scheduled a soda fountain startup, soft serve service, icy setup, or ordered the cups for it nonetheless. I've never really placed an opening order, right? Up until that point, my cooking was what got me into the positions. I'd done ordering, but ordering for my station. I'd ordered produce. I'd done all of those pieces. But when I stepped into that role, I was coming from, and my leadership was coming from a place where I was limited by much smaller environments, where I was blessed with a talented staff as well that cared and loved the food that I was cooking with. I'm sure that sounds familiar. Now, I really wanted to be a part of the leadership team at Westchester, and the only shot I had was to be the beach chef and open this beach club. And the beach was a monster. At the time, it was doing about $1 million in revenue in 15 weeks, basically from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Now, the kicker of this operation is that it was staffed by, I'm going to call them kids, not trying to be offensive, but they were really young people. They were between the age of like 15 and 20, where we had to get work permits for a lot of them because they were technically under work age and were limited on the hours that they could work. And I needed to hire 70 of these kids in a 2 or 3 week period and then have them trained within 5 days of the opening of this beach club. It was really hard to do that because, right, they're still in school and we're still trying to get them onboarded and get them to a place where they're actually going to be able to execute for the slaughter that was opening weekend. My kitchen management were college interns who started basically in mid-May, joined me, and came with a CMAA training, college training, but not a lot of exposure to the industry yet. I had 3 cooks on loan from the main club, basically fairly young in their early 20s, really didn't want to be at the beach club because the beach club was kind of seen as like the castaway at the time, and they really just didn't want to be there. So my hands in this beach chef role were absolutely full. Ordering food, hiring kids, putting away food, trying to recognize what equipment that I needed because there was a lot of missing pieces. A lot of the racks were kind of rusted out. It's a beach club right on the Long Island Sound. So, you know, things decay and deteriorate over a season. The season before that ended, the chef had left and didn't leave it in a truly desirable state. Now I needed to get startups on machines. I needed to get menus written and completed. I needed to train my intern managers, who from this point forward I'm going to call managers, but they were still interns. I mean, I held them to a really high standard, and I give them massive kudos for putting in all of the work that they did, because we literally worked around the clock for that month to try and get things into a working order. If any of this is resonating with you and you're ready to do something about it, then I urge you to click the link in the description below the video, answer the 2 questions, and let's schedule a commitment-free call to discuss how I help chefs just like you. I really wanted to show everything that I was capable of from a food standpoint in the kitchen, but in the end, I had no choice but to let that go. I couldn't hide behind the stove. I couldn't cook my way out of this, right? There was nobody else who was going to take on these responsibilities and start up the services or get staff, go through the cold calling process of calling hundreds of people who could potentially work as my staff. At the time, it was extremely uncomfortable because it was this entirely new experience. And not only that, but I was really on the edge of failing most of the time. In fact, I made a lot of little micro failures along the way as I was making mistakes, learning things not to do when hiring, or interview questions that I couldn't ask, or trying to help people understand what a mop looked like, right? Going through the process of actually assembling mops with people and showing them what a mop head looks like, changing out mop water. The list goes on for sure. And looking back, I'm really grateful that I was not allowed to cook. At the time, there was no way to take care of all of the other pieces of training and hiring and managing and order checking, supplying, resupplying, and cooking. I tried butchering a few times in the beginning of the season. What ended up happening was at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was butchering and I was alone because, well, basically everybody else had to go. And I wanted to continue to do that, but it just wasn't sustainable. Ultimately, not being able to be in the kitchen and having to do all of these other pieces taught me a few really critical lessons, but the one that was most important was to learn how to be my team's leader and work on the operation, not in it, and work in it only when it was absolutely necessary. In the end, I also got a crash course on developing trust, and we're going to talk about that and how those 2 things interrelate a little bit here in a second. But that really brings me to the first key. In order to stop carrying all of the weight of an operation and to stop being the one who's really doing everything or trying to, it's a real small mindset shift. Maybe you caught it a few seconds ago, but the key is here to stop working in it and make sure that you're the one working on it. We need to be servant leaders. We need to work with our team. More often than not, what people really need is leadership, especially when you're working with inexperienced new staff who have no idea of how to get something done. They need a leader, and leaders are far harder to come by than followers are. Like it's tempting to say that, oh, I need to work with this person side by side to do this, and sometimes that's necessary, but somebody has to be in that leadership role. Just like my daughter needs me to be her father and make those father decisions in order to better her being, as opposed to being her friend first. It's a much bigger picture. And most staff isn't capable of seeing the big picture and working on the whole of the operation. Now, when I was put into that position, I had to learn how to get out of the way of always being in it. I had to learn how to get out of my staff way and allow them to do what they were capable of doing, because only I could really see the bigger picture. Only I was really in a position to kind of pull and hold all of those pieces together. That really required me to give my people a chance to do the work at the station level, in the operations, working the grill station, working the sandwich station. And I had to learn how to just check on it. I had to make it a priority for me to move out of their way and allow them to handle as much as they could, even more than I thought they could, because the job was just too big for me to do it all. I had to allow them to make decisions and handle tasks that didn't allow or didn't require my direct involvement, and figure out how to rope in my interns to work as managers. As we were moving along, we were developing little basic systems that they could manage, so that they could manage the people that were around them who knew less than they did. Now, it meant that there were a lot of mistakes that made, but those mistakes were better than serving nothing. I had to be allowed, I had to make it okay for myself to allow them to make those minor mistakes. And those mistakes are actually a good thing, because when people make mistakes and they share that with you, then that actually allows them to build trust and allows them to start to build a rapport with you. That trust comes from people's understanding that you're going to teach and support them and not blow up or explode every time something goes wrong. Now, trust requires another skill, right? It requires predictability. Predictability in how you're going to react, or more specifically, how you're not going to react. When the team knows that you're not going to react explosively when something goes wrong, they're far more likely to come to you with bad news more regularly, in a regular cadence, more easily. And that's actually a great sign. It's a sign, it's a clear sign that you're building trust with the team. It's a great check-in along the way. As that trust is building, you can start to empower your staff to make more critical decisions within the scope of their capability. And inevitably, that is going to reduce the dependency on you. And for me, that took a little bit of time. It took practice, but eventually it does become second nature. And now I'm in a much better place working through that much more easily. All right, so that first piece is really about shifting from in it to on it, stepping away from being the literal frontline employee and moving into that executive mindset where it's a little bumpy, but it's necessary so that you can see all of the other things that nobody else can see. Now, this next key I learned after a few weeks of working at the Everglades Club with Russell Scott, certified master chef. And I went there to go and be a senior sous chef with him. And I was in the banquet kitchen and I was getting ready to do some events. Now, one of the outlets there was called the Palm Terrace, and the Palm Terrace is a separate location from the main kitchen, and we did really high level events. Very high expectations, very small margin for error, very talented, very skilled staff, impeccable equipment. And up until that point, I had kept a lot of things in my head. I had my time in my head as far as when I was going to need to fire, when I was going to need to execute. And to say this as succinctly as I can, Chef and I didn't see necessarily eye to eye because he couldn't see my plan. He didn't like that he couldn't see my plan. And that forced me to start to really get clear and get written out and get a very clearly defined timeline as to how events were going to come together, how I was going to arrive at that final destination, because that was something that he was going to now require. And something that I had never up until that point done, but something that I had to adopt if I was going to continue to do this job. Plan eventually ended up flowing over into how I ended up managing my time while I was trying out in 2017 for the Culinary Olympic team and working to take the Master Chef exam. So key number 2 is time. Time blocking, time management, time budgeting. It's called a lot of things, but above all, it's about intentionality, right? It's about being intentional with how time is used, purposeful in how that time is used. I'm going to save you a few years of trial and error and recommend getting started with some documenting, right? This whole process moves along much, much faster when you start documenting where your time's going. And documenting looks a lot like using a time journal, which is literally a way of tracking how you're spending time, right? That's why it's called so many different things. But it really can be as simple as writing in a small little Moleskine notebook exactly how the day is going in 15-minute increments. Now, once documented, you can easily compare what's actually getting done with what needs to get done. It's about finding and seeing where time's going and where it needs to go, and being very open, honest, and clear about how time's being spent. Again, in 15-minute increments. What are you doing from this time to this time? How much time are you actually spending on your commute? And the funny thing is when you start paying attention to time in quarter hours, it starts to get used very, very differently. Just like anything, what you track, you can improve. And by diving deep into how your time is spent, you get to see where it's going and then pick and choose the tasks that only you can really handle. When was the last time you tracked your day in 15-minute increments? The first time I did it, I was really shocked as to how much time that I was wasting and using inefficiently. When the full day ends up being laid out and you can actually see how time is spent, where it's going, how it's being used, you can definitely identify the anchors that give structure to the day. If there are typical interruptions, you get to see those. You also can notice and find trends in where you need to be when, and if you're leaving yourself enough time to do the things that you're supposed to be doing. Now for me, I easily noticed that I was spending too much time in the kitchen as I started to get a little bit further along in my career. Like that's a natural trend for me. I like to find myself back into the food and in the cooking, but inevitably the busier that we get, the bigger the team that we have, the pen becomes the most important tool that we have in our box. And when I started to document regularly, I came to learn a lot more about myself and accountability. I talk all about accountability in the video linked somewhere here. But let's just say that accountability is definitely one of those things that spreads from us as leadership. It definitely echoes from the ripples that we make. Once the day is laid out with everything that's getting done in 15-minute increments, I take a real-time look and ask if the things that are taking place are the things that should be taking place with my time. And after seeing the flow of how days are going, I like to create blocks for specific periods of time for planning, for the anchors such as service times or as far as pre-meals or meetings, supervision pieces, and strategic tasks that need to get done. Essentially creating a performance schedule for myself. And the key here that I learned the hard way was to prioritize activities that align with my role as a leader rather than those as a doer. Again, working on it, not necessarily in it. Scheduling the times that I needed to be in it and scheduling the times when I needed to be working on it. as opposed to keeping an endless to-do list. Because I can honestly say, for the last 10 years of my career, inevitably I finish my day with a massive prep list, a to-do list that never actually gets done. Now, to do this, to move in that direction, I start with a spreadsheet. Start with a spreadsheet just to keep track of all of those individual little pieces of what's going on in my day. Now, here's a quick way to implement this. It's important to go in and first identify the key activities from the time journal. Determine which activities are crucial for my role. Things like service times, meetings, order deadlines. Those are great places to start. Then, from there, I move on and I assign time blocks. I basically block out pieces in my calendar that allow me to allocate specific times for the activities that need to take place. From there, it's important to stick to the schedule. Follow those time blocks, make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing them, and then at the end of the week, set aside time and review to make sure that those blocks are working and adjust as necessary. Review how well that plan worked and adjust the plan. And then follow the plan the following week. And again, adjust at the end of the week. Again, it takes time to get this practice under control, but once it's done, it becomes second nature. It allows time to be used with absolute intentionality. Now, the third key to moving from being the keystone, where you feel like you have to do everything yourself, is delegation. And that is a $5 word that everybody uses. Delegate, delegate, delegate. And for me, it wasn't something that was easily understood until I learned how to properly prioritize and assign tasks. I remember hearing for the first time, when everything is a priority, then nothing is. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because it leaves everything in the gray area. When you make everything a priority and everything's of utmost importance, which in theory sounds great, it allows everything to be in a gray area, because then nothing is actually more important than other things. And in most operations, in most jobs, in most tasks, there are critical aspects that need to be executed before anything else really takes place. So I want to say, we need to make sure that we really actually are establishing priorities, because mediocrity hides in the gray. Accountability is impossible in the gray area. And in order to move to priorities and to establish a hierarchy of those priorities, I use a tool that's called the Eisenhower matrix in order to sort those tasks. To start this process, it's important to first do a brain dump of all tasks and get everything out of my head. All the tasks, all the things that are taking up space in my brain, and literally just get it down on paper. Then I use this matrix, right? So what we need to do after all of those tasks are brain dumped out onto a piece of paper, then I look to the matrix and I sort tasks according to two metrics. One, urgency, and two, level of importance. Now, if something is important and urgent, then it's something that you have to do. And therefore that makes that a 1. Makes it very clear, makes it very concise, right? It's something that you have to do and you have to do it now. Now, because of time being a factor, we continue down in urgency, but we know that it's not important for you to do. Still important, but not important for you to do. And that becomes a 2. That's something that needs to get delegated and handed out, right? And this is how we're prioritizing this. It's a priority 2. Now, next, we look at something that's not urgent but still important, and that becomes a 3 because it's something that we are then going to need to schedule, because it's something that you're going to need to do. And then finally, we have things that are not important and not urgent. Inevitably, our lists are often cluttered with those things, and those become 4s, and those get deleted from the list. Those things get removed or tied into other things, wrapped into other tasks. And then when we do that, it allows us to, again, prioritize those tasks with a 1 through 4. We can look at our task and we can identify the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, and then we can make our subsequent list after that. Now, I don't love list making. I don't love sitting at the desk. I don't love doing admin work, but nobody else can do this work and think at this level again about the operation. And that's why I have the role as the executive, to be able to bounce in the operation and then back on it. And this allows me to very clearly prioritize and very easily get a good handle on what I need to delegate. After I go through this list and I have a list of 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, then I take a minute to actually look at the most urgent priorities and see if I can kind of combine some of those things, so that way I have a clear view as to what has the highest impact over everything else. I think as an executive, it's really important to do this at least quarterly to stay in the driver's seat with how time and effort and energy is being spent and not being driven around by where your tasks take you. Inevitably, when things are laid out clearly, it shows the absolute need for delegation. You see your clear list of twos and you realize that there's more than a day's work, or there's more than several days worth of work, several weeks worth of work. And if maybe there's a way to reappropriate how you're delegating, to check your list to the skill sets of where it's assigned, and make sure that you're not doing the work that other people should be doing. That's also a really key way to help people prepare for their next role. This leads to delegating the tasks best handed off and assigned to my SUs and to the other team members, choosing to delegate as opposed to leaving others to figure out what need to be done, hoping that things are done. I had to realize that success in my new role means getting good at pieces that in the beginning are awfully uncomfortable and also take me out of the kitchen. It's very tempting to continue to do things that you're habitually good at. I know, I love being in the kitchen. Flow is an amazing state to be in. I think back to working a busy service and absolutely crushing it with my meat temps exactly where they're supposed to be. Everything seasoned, spot on. It's a great feeling. But a lot of this may seem completely simple to you, and a lot of this may even seem completely obvious, but like so many things that are simple, they're easy to do. And things that are easy to do are also things that are very easy not to do. And just as great food is the culmination of all things done well at each stage of the process, whether simple or not, all things that you need to be doing to run your operation so it can't run you require simple, fundamental actions that just stack together and yield results. That's why making a leader shift to be working on it, not in it. Making sure that you're intentional with your time and delegating, as well as prioritizing, have changed me into the leader that I am. These are 3 keys required to move away from being that keystone. Just as consistent knife work, highly efficient prep work, and working clean made me an exceptionally proficient cook, hell, made me a master chef. Those leadership skills are foundational to being an exceptional leader that is not constantly throwing themselves into the middle of every situation, who inspires confidence and clarity. Think of your kitchen as a symphony orchestra. As an executive chef, you're no longer just a player in the orchestra. You're the conductor. You're not playing every single instrument. You're not working every single station. You're orchestrating the performance. And the shift from doing to leading is crucial. Your success as an executive chef depends on it. Your team's success requires that you have an ability to delegate, to strategize, and to inspire. If you feel like you're constantly on the wheel, feeling like you need to be doing everything yourself, stretched thin, constantly putting out fires, and you want to be the confident leader that's running your operation so it can't run you, then I can help. Click the link in the description below the video to find out how. As we wrap up, remember that these changes, while challenging, lead to actual change. And it's possibly going to be a little messy along the way. Regardless of how it feels, it's the journey and the process that makes us who we are to become. By focusing on leadership, structure, and delegation, you can create a culinary program that runs smoothly without you being the keystone in every arch. Embrace these keys and watch your kitchen transform. Thank you for joining me, and remember, as an executive chef, what got you here won't be enough to get you to what's next. Now, if you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you soon.